Of all the famous images preserved in our national archives, the most requested photo of all time is this one.
You remember when you talked about finding an ally for Nixon?
Someone from the outside.
I need to get this letter to the president.
You'll never guess in a million years who just showed up at the Northwest Gate asking to see him.
It's Elvis. Elvis Presley. You swear this isn't a joke, because his penmanship is horrible.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So you think we should meet with him?
Yes, Mr. President.
During my nap hour.
Everybody loves Elvis.
Call me.
He could really help us with the youth vote. He would also like a badge.
A what?
I would like to go undercover as a federal agent. I've been in 31 major motion pictures. That makes me an expert in costume and disguise. I could infiltrate the communists, and then I'd bust them all. Let's do this thing.
An undercover rock and roller. Sounds ludicrous.
I can supply my own firearms.
All right, now what do we have on this guy?
Well, he's one of the most famous men on the planet. Loves guns, hates the Beatles.
The Beatles. Well, I don't like them.
Okay, sir, do you have any firearms or weapons of any kind on your person?
It's a good thing they didn't catch this little fella in my boot.
Mr. Presley, we're going to have to go over the protocols. Mr. President, Mr. Elvis Presley. On the coffee table is a dish with M&Ms. Those are only for the president.
M&Ms are my favorite.
Mine too.
There is also an unopened bottle of Dr. Pepper.
You have a bottle opener?
Please do not open it. Please do not drink from it, because it's only for the president.
What in the good God is going on?
I don't know, sir.
Give a little love. Make sure that we get a picture with Mr. Presley and me.
Go on and do it.
You and me, we rose from nothing. But look where I am today. Look where you are.
Give a little love. Ha! Go on and do it.
That's how I learned to develop these knuckles of steel. Now slap them. Come on, harder. Harder. Let it out. Let it out. Those are the steel claws of a tiger, Mr. President.
Give a little love. Give a little love.
Wow, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Look at that. They are excited to see you.
Not bad. Not
Kevin,
bad.
thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. What are they serving at the bar?
What are they serving at the bar today? Congratulations on the movie. I caught it this week, and I think it's hilarious. I love you and Michael Shannon together. I could only hope that the two of you would go on to make so many more movies together, be it as Elvis and Nixon in like a fantasy buddy duo.
Elton John and Roosevelt, their famous meeting. Yeah, we could go on and on.
How did this project come to you, and what attracted you to it initially?
I was really attracted to it because it's such a crazy story. A lot of people, I think, when they see that actual photograph of Nixon and Elvis, think it's like a doctored photo, like it's not real. And secondarily, I wanted to do it because of Michael Shannon. Because when I heard he was going to play Elvis, I thought, well, that's an amazing actor, and that's an actor who will probably avoid doing an imitation or a caricature of a man who, frankly, has been played as a caricature in a lot of films. I thought he would approach it, he's an amazing stage actor who's really been building an incredible film career in the last number of years. He's on stage right now doing Long Day's Journey into Night here on Broadway.
Which I've heard is unbelievable.
I'm sure he's fantastic. I actually played that role on Broadway many years ago with Jack Lemmon, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. But when I heard he was doing it, when I read the script, it was, I literally thought this film, if we do it right, is going to be just left of Dr. Strangelove. Because it's incredibly serious. I mean, Elvis was very serious about actually wanting to be made a federal agent undercover. He felt he was upset about where America was. He was upset about the protests against the Vietnam War. People didn't seem to respect the presidency. He was a big supporter of law enforcement, and he truly and honestly believed that if he was made an undercover agent at large, he could help America go in the right direction.
I love it. No training at all. He just thinks he could infiltrate something.
Yes, and that he could disguise himself and that no one would know he was coming.
Now, you said that you sort of complimented Michael Shannon and said that he could bring something to a role that has been imitated, that has been done so many times. But you yourself bring something to a role that has been imitated and done so many times. Nixon is arguably the most sort of impersonated president with, the peace signs up in the air. So
Do you do a Nixon?
I do not
You
do
almost just were about to do a Nixon.
I was so close, but then I realized I'm next to one of the greatest impressionists we have, and I'm not going to do that. You said Jack Lemmon's name, and I was so close to be like, oh, please do Jack. I'm not going to do it, though.
All right.
But were you nervous at all about playing Nixon? Did you really have to sort of think about what you could do that wouldn't be the sort of classic impersonation of him?
Yes, and I should just, in all honesty, say that many years ago I screen tested to play Richard Nixon in the film Frost Nixon, a role I did not fucking get. So this is basically my revenge film.
Not bitter, I see. Not bitter.
Not bitter at all. No, actually, what was great was Ron Howard, when he was going to make that film, hadn't decided yet that Frank Langella, who did the stage production, would also do the film. So he asked a number of actors if we would go on film and actually sort of become Nixon so he could see it. So I was in Vegas doing a film called 21. And in my hotel room, my makeup and hair team made me look as much like Nixon as possible. And I filmed like 4 scenes, including the famous farewell to the White House speech that Nixon gave on his last day in office. And sent that off to Ron Howard, and then, didn't get the part. And however, I thought I'd lost that, and then I found it just before we were going to start shooting Elvis Nixon, and it was really helpful because I understood why I didn't get the role, and I avoided the things that I did in that that were a little bit too Nixon-esque.
You went a little too far?
I think I went a little too far, but actually it was really helpful to watch it again, and the thing that I think we both, Michael and I, wanted to achieve was that, first of all, I don't think an imitation would work for sort of more than a sketch, like a Saturday Night Live sketch. You could get away with it because it's high comedy, it's very fast, people see who you're doing. But for a movie, it's like I wanted to find the sort of essence of the man, and particularly his physicality, because when I went and I looked at a lot of photos of him, like even in private, he somehow manages to look awkward just sitting in a chair. Like he was so uncomfortable in his own body, like the wrong profession, to be a politician. So I wanted to try to find the physicality of him, because so much of what we know about him and what we learn in this film is a certain level of paranoia, and he doesn't have a lot of respect for himself and doesn't think he's handsome, and there's all this stuff that gets revealed. And then also just to be able to have a cadence. He had a particular way of speaking that if you just try to get around it a little bit, then it's not you're imitating, but you're giving the right attack. And then finally, the other thing he did more than almost any president I think I've ever could imagine is he swore all the time. Yeah. He was grumpy, and everyone was a motherfucker.
And we also know this. I mean, the film states at the beginning that this is before he started taping everything in the Oval Office. Right. But because of those tapes, we also know that he swore all the time.
All the time. I mean, he was there. Somebody was always trying to get in and get him, and something was wrong, and he was very grumpy. So
deeply insecure.
Deeply insecure. Yeah.
You talk so much about the physicality of the character, and you've always been I think, incredible at creating very physical manners. I mean, going back to The Usual Suspects and what you did with your character there, you're amazing physically on camera and transforming these characters that way. What kind of focus does it take when you're shooting a movie to maintain that? Are you the type of actor who can sort of get in and out of it? Or do you find that when you're doing Nixon and you have to think about being uncomfortable in your chair, you should kind of stay physically like that all day?
No, I go in and out of it. I make a lot of jokes. I do a lot of impressions. I make the crew laugh. And it was particularly fun doing Bill Clinton while I was on set doing Richard Nixon.
You do Bill Clinton?
I confused everybody.
You jump into a take doing that? How long have you done a Clinton? I don't think I've heard that before.
I have known the president, and over the years I did a number of events for him, the Democratic Party, and then after he left office, for his foundation, and he likes to pretend he's hoarse. So he gets up and says, I can't speak tonight. My friend Kevin's going to give my speech for me. And then I get up and I start giving a speech, and he goes, shut up, sit down, you do that too good.
So were you nervous at all going into portraying Nixon? You said that you went back and looked at this footage of yourself, and you had maybe gone too far in it. Before you had said yes to the role, were you nervous at all playing Nixon, and that you may go too far again or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I was nervous right up until the point when I started being able to have conversations with Liza Johnson, our director, and with Michael, because she was so very specific about finding the tone that she wanted the whole film to have. Because it is absolutely absurd, but we have to play it as seriously as possible. And I think also the rest of the cast, you mentioned Michael, but there's a wonderful cast of characters. And I think they all do an incredible job. And the fun, I saw the movie for the first time last night with an audience, and it was really great to see how funny the movie actually has turned out to be.
Did you ever think about comparing Nixon to Frank Underwood, how those two presidents differ? I'm going to be perfectly honest, it was such a cheap shot. I said Frank Underwood, I knew that was going to happen.
Well, that's very kind, and says more about them than about me. No, I mean, it's an interesting thing, there I was on a Oval Office set, knowing that I was going to play a president, and yet at the same time really not wanting anyone in an audience to, for a second, think about Frank Underwood. And so in a way you have to really trust what you're doing and how you're approaching it, and the fact that these two men are very, very different kinds of characters. One is obviously fictional and the other's not. But I think once I felt that, we started, and all of my scenes were in the Oval Office, so that very first day that we started shooting, I think I just decided I had to trust myself, I had to trust the material, I had to trust Michael and Liza, and I'm very pleased at the result.
As you should. I think it's a hilarious movie. As I told you before, I really loved it. When you're working with Michael, you're sitting across from him. As you said, he's another great actor. You're a fantastic actor. Do you guys, obviously you probably didn't have that much time on this movie to rehearse or anything like that. How are the two of you working together? Are you figuring out the scene together, or just trusting the writing and going from there?
No, I mean, you rehearse, you talk quite a bit, then you begin to camera block a scene, and then before you know it, you're shooting. The thing that was really interesting about working with Michael was he's very intense. And he was very into this role. In fact, he used to walk off set and he was always listening to a CD, and I only found out later that it was something that Jerry Schilling, who Alex Pettyfer plays in the movie, had given him, which was an interview that Elvis did for a documentary, of which one line out of this 45-minute interview was used in that documentary. So no one in the public has heard this particular interview. And so he just kept leaving, and he was listening to Elvis talk, and this interview might have been done about a month and a half before this event happened. So it was very close to Elvis's state of mind, what he was going through, what he was thinking about, the books he was reading, his philosophy about a lot of things. And so Michael would go off. I thought he was listening to Elvis sing, but because I couldn't hear what he was listening to, but actually it was just his voice. So he was very in it, and he was so intense. And again, Michael was not trying to do an imitation, but then every now and then, in the middle of a scene, he would do something that was so Elvis-like. I could not believe it, and I burst into laughter, so I would ruin a take, because it was so Elvis-like. It was so unexpected. He suddenly did like a karate thing.
Well, it's true. I mean, it's shocking when he does something in the movie that's so Elvis-like, because outside of those very Elvis sort of iconic things that he does, he's very soft-spoken. He's a much more soft-spoken version of Elvis, whereas you said most people would play it with just everything would be kind of like a honky-tonk sort of lip read sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think also that's one of the themes of the film is that it is about these two men who in very similar ways were lonely men, were placed in the spotlight of fame, and were at the top of their professions, and yet were incredibly insecure, had a lot of personal issues, and were lonely people. And I think that that's something that's so interesting to have explored. And in a weird way, neither Michael or I are the star of the movie. The star of the movie is when they come together. What actually happens to these two figures who you would think at first wouldn't have anything in common. But slowly, as this odd and strange meeting happens, they begin to find a symmetry, an empathy for each other, and by the end of the experience, they really like each other. And in fact, we found out that years later, they kept in touch with each other. That when one of them would end up in the hospital, the other would call and find out how he was doing. So there was some kind of very strange bond that was created on this day.
Elvis, one of the few people that think Nixon got screwed out of the White House or something like that. You talk about, what also brings them together in the movie together, as you said, are the themes that both of them sort of relate to each other through, which is fame. And Elvis, Michael Shannon, has this great monologue or scene where he talks about how whenever he walks into a room, no one sees the boy that grew up in Memphis. No one sees who he actually is. They just see their first kiss, one of his movies that he was in. Is this something that you, at the top of your game, relate to as well as an actor? Kind of a corny segue, but I mean, just kind of, you've won an Oscar, you have this incredible show, you were the artistic director of the Old Vic, you've done such incredible things. Do you ever feel the trappings of fame at all?
It's an interesting thing that you just called it the trappings of fame. I don't know if anybody read Andre Agassi's book, but it's a remarkable book about somebody who was at the top of his game, was #1 in the world, and had a secret, which was that he hated tennis. It's a remarkable book. It's called Open, and I suggest anybody get a chance to read it. But what's interesting about reading that book, and particularly for me, is I saw so many parallels to the ritual, the life, the hotel rooms, the travel, the being around people that you only have just met, suddenly having a new family, suddenly being on a new film set, suddenly going somewhere else. There is a nomadic part of the life of an actor that absolutely reminded me of the life of a tennis player. And there's a lonely part of it. With respect to how people respond to meeting you or seeing you or recognizing you, it can be any number of different kinds of ways. Generally, if someone runs up to you, because their first instinct when they see you is to pull their phone out and to take a selfie with you while you're standing at the urinal, you think to yourself,
sorry about that. That was my fault.
It's really not right. But people there's a kind of panic that happens because they think it's their only chance. But actually what's more interesting and where I'm able to have genuine conversations is when I just meet people and they give me shit like anybody does. But once somebody says, you're my favorite actor and I love every movie you've ever done, and I'm really sorry, this is really awkward, I hate doing this, you're like, yeah, okay, there's kind of nowhere to go after that.
There's no way I'm going to live up to what you expect of me right now.
But also I think there's an interesting thing too, which is that I always feel a little bit like I'm at a disadvantage because people think they know me, and so they treat me like an old friend, like an old pal. Johnny Carson said it once, that he had flown to do a stand-up routine, I think in Texas, maybe flew into Dallas, and like 500 people showed up at the airport to greet him. And he said, and this is true, I don't make this up, he said it was a very odd circumstance because 500 people were patting me on the back, shaking my hand, treating me like an old friend, and I didn't know who the fuck any of those people were.
And that's something that, has probably clearly happened to you as well.
Well, I mean, versions of it. It's an interesting thing that I don't see myself from the outside. I see myself from the experience I have, and if people could imagine when you go and watch a movie and you're looking at a screen, my experience of doing that was completely the opposite because I was standing in front of a camera and there was a whole crew around me, and I remember that experience, and we shot in that location where there was that crazy woman, and I'm remembering the experience. It's very hard sometimes to watch a movie and actually finally see it as a movie, because for me it was an experience.
Right, especially now as a producer, right? You produce a lot of times as well. When did you start producing, and what made you want to become sort of get into a producerial role of the movies that you were making?
The very first film I produced was a film called Swimming with Sharks.
I love that movie.
Which is, I think, a must now. If anybody wants to go into the film business, they have to just watch that movie.
This will happen to you at one point. You will get paper cuts from envelopes.
Apparently, whenever Harvey Weinstein was being particularly horrible to his assistants, he would go to put in the dailies of a movie he had to watch, and a movie would pop out, and it was Swimming with Sharks, and it was like, that's not funny.
Has everyone, just very briefly, Swimming with Sharks is this wonderful movie where Kevin plays a movie executive who is just absolutely vicious and horrible to a really great Frank Whaley, who we don't see in movies enough anymore, but Frank Whaley is the assistant that Kevin is just always abusing every minute of the movie.
Yeah, he deserved it. And actually, Benicio del Toro plays the outgoing assistant in that film, which is why I then recommended him to Bryan Singer for Usual Suspects.
Is that true?
Yeah, we had just shot Swimming with Sharks, and Bryan was having a very difficult time casting Fenster. And so I recommended Benicio, and then I remember Bryan called me later and said the audition was amazing, but I didn't understand a thing he said.
Can I ask, not to get too tangential about that, but what was it about Benicio in that scene that made you think he'd be great? It's such a brief moment in Swimming with Sharks.
Well, he was brilliant. He was very funny. I could see he had a tremendous future. And he was an actor that was unique and quite different. And because in the script of The Usual Suspects, that particular character, there was not a lot written about the character's past. It was kind of an open book. And so who knew that Benicio was going to come in and create his own language?
Absolutely. So you were saying that Swimming with Sharks was the
Swimming with Sharks was my first film that I produced, and I love producing a lot. I like, being at the Old Vic or producing Social Network or Captain Phillips or even House of Cards, where you can bring together filmmakers, you can bring together actors, you can help people make their dreams come true. And when you trust the talent and trust the creatives, it's an incredible experience.
What's you produced House of Cards with Fincher as well as The Social Network. I think The Social Network is just an absolute classic at this point. What's your working relationship like with someone who is so exact and knows almost to a T what they want in every scene? I've talked to some producers who've said it's not that fun for them to collaborate with people like that because they want to be able to have a lot of say and really work with them. But Fincher seems to be someone who walks into a meeting and says, I know exactly what everything is going to be in this moment of the movie.
Yeah, I find it incredibly comforting to work with somebody who knows exactly what they're doing and exactly what they want. I like being directed. I enjoy somebody who can help me carve the right performance out and get rid of all of the excess. And very often that's what David is doing. He's just beating the acting out of you. Take after take after take after take, and getting it to its simplest, quickest, cleanest form so that the idea and the words just zing and land. And I prefer that to someone who, for whatever reason, feels intimidated and doesn't really tell you what they think and kind of lets you wander around. I know I'm much better as an actor when I'm directed than when I have to save my ass.
Absolutely. I'm going to turn it over to the audience for some questions. Does anyone have any?
We're going to start with a question from an online viewer. So Jordan would like to know, can you talk a little bit more about your involvement with the Old Vic Theatre in London?
Yes. My involvement has ended but as of last August, but my involvement started in 1998 when I moved a play that I had done at a smaller theater in London called the Almeida, a production of The Iceman Cometh, that we then moved to the Old Vic, and we'd played 16 weeks there. I fell in love with that theater and that building. It had just recently been purchased to become a trust, a charitable organization, and they were looking for an artistic director, and crazy me decided that I wanted to go there and become the artistic director. So I moved to London in 2003, and we opened our doors in 2004, and I was the artistic director for 11 seasons until last August.
Did you enjoy your time?
I loved it. It was incredible.
Next question.
How's it going, Kevin?
Good.
Huge fan. Question, I want to know, throughout your whole career, what has been your greatest challenge, be it with acting project or producing, directing, whatever?
It's a great question. Usually it's answering questions from audiences. I find... No, it is a great question. And it's a little bit like, I feel sometimes people ask me, like, what's your greatest movie? What's the favorite role you've ever had? And I always feel like I so hope it's ahead of me and not behind me. I hope the things that I'm excited about now, about where the entertainment industry is going, where forms are going, where storytelling is going, where platforms is going, is so exciting that I actually feel very challenged right now to try to open up new doors and go to new places that I haven't gone before. And I'm very fortunate that many of the challenges that I've faced, I have not faced alone. I've been so fortunate to have incredible collaborators and a remarkable team around me that helps me get through even the times when I think it's not going well.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
No, you cannot.
Okay. Next question from the audience.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, you're talking about where the industry is going and all these different forms, and I'm curious. There's a lot of people who feel like the future of the independent film, or even just sort of the small-scale human film, is dying in many ways, and that movies like Elvis and Nixon, that's going to be difficult to maintain in terms of the economy of movies right now. Do you see it that way, and do you see TV as the future as well, or do you think there is still going to be a pocket for movies like this?
I think there will be a pocket, and I think that we do not yet have the studio of the future, but I think it's coming. And I think the studio of the future will be smart enough to realize that there is a huge audience out there, which is evidenced by the fact that there are more loyal fans for character-driven drama on television. I mean, movies wish they had fans that were as totally obsessive about the shows they love and adore. I believe there is a window, an opportunity to make films, under 50 million, that we're going to see a resurgence of, because the audience is there, and it's just going to take some very brave executives to say, you know what? Let's fill this gap, because there's a lot of really incredible films that should be made, that need to be made, that should be feature films, and I think that's where part of the future is headed.
Absolutely. Next question.
Hi there. As a Southerner, I want to commend you on your incredible low country accent in House of Cards. It's really good. How did you learn to speak that way? Like, what was the process?
I remarkably good dialect coaches. I've been learning dialects. I've been doing voices my whole life, because I found out when I was really young that if I learned how to do an impression of like Jimmy Stewart or Cary Grant, I could make my mother laugh, and it was just the greatest sound I ever heard. So I always had like an ear, and I think that's part of what doing impressions is about, is just having an ear for it. But once I got to Juilliard, incredible dialect coaches that really trained me and gave me a foundation of being able to appreciate that there are certain characteristics about the way people speak that have a lot to do with the way they sound. And I love, one of the reasons why I love being able to do something that I hope sounds accurate, although there is many people who hate my accent as you enjoy it. I will tell you that. I get a lot of hate on Twitter. And that's fine. But it's so interesting how if you can discover almost the way a person breathes. I always used to love doing, William Hurt, one of the great actors. William Hurt is such an interesting impression to do, because it is so difficult.
Who has a William Hurt impression?
I do a Bill Hurt impression. What is the point of doing it alone? So I love doing it because doing Bill Hurt is like everything is an effort. It's like even breathing is difficult.
Can I ask, is that your most, I mean, William Hurt is not that esoteric, but is that your most esoteric impression?
It's pretty obscure, I know. I kind of love doing,
It's amazing.
I like doing people that people don't expect you do. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience, right here.
Hi, as an actor's actor, you would be considered. I'm wondering other actors or actresses that you admire, that influence you, and also with my girlfriend being from Glasgow, Scotland here, I'm wondering, I visited her, and I'm wondering the audience reception or perceptions that are different maybe in the UK, you know, maybe the same kind of work, what you notice in the audience difference.
I'll start with that. I have to say it's very interesting. You know, I've now, in my time at the Old Vic, I probably did at least 11 or 12 plays in the last decade, a play a year or two plays a year. Some of those plays came to New York, some of those plays we toured around the world. And I really, truly find audiences are very, very similar, very passionate, very attentive. Some audiences respond louder to certain things. There's certain colloquialisms that a British audience might get over a US audience. But, you know, I've traveled to Italy and Istanbul and China, and it's quite remarkable. The way in which audiences pay attention, and they are quite different. I remember once we were in Israel, I was with Jack Lemmon, we were doing Long Day's Journey into Night, and we played the Chabima Theater in Tel Aviv. And this audience was the most attentive audience we ever played in front of, and the quietest. Literally, nothing. There was nothing. And I remember one night, it was about 5 or 6 performances in, and I had this scene with Jack where it was like a monologue, and he had no dialogue. And suddenly, this one night, he started to sort of respond vocally to me. So I'd go, blah, 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 and he'd go, sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I go, blah, 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 and he goes, yeah, sure, I understand, yeah. And he did this for like 5 minutes, and it was so weird. And I got backstage, I said, what the hell were you doing? He said, I don't know, I guess I just wanted you to know that somebody was listening and cared.
And I have to say thank you for the Jack Lemmon impression. Kevin, I have to let you go. When can people see Elvis and Nixon?
I believe it opens Friday.
It opens Friday.
I believe it opens Friday, yes.
It's so funny, guys. It's really great, and it's 2 really fantastic performances at the center. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.